Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 51st Geomatics Engineering Conference. Today's first speaker was originally from Montana, where he got his Associates of Science degree. He is a licensed professional in both California and Nevada. He now lives in Stockton for 10 years as a project manager for a small engineering firm and landscape company. And he is also a member of the CLSA Central Valley chapter and a charter member of the OSGeo. He is also the editor of the OSGeo Journal, and he writes a regular column on boundary surveying for the American Survey magazine. Here to talk to us about what the geospatial professional of the future looks like, Mr. Landon Blake.
Thank you for that introduction. I like to walk around. So you guys hear me in the back okay? Yes. Okay. Well, I thank you for coming to my talk this morning. I appreciate that. I always worry the night before that I'm going to get here and nobody's going to show up. So thank you for coming. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it. They always put me back here in the back, so I must think my information is dangerous. So we're going to talk a little bit about what I think the future of land surveyors is going to be, future of land surveying. When you notice I didn't say land surveyor in my talk, because I don't know if the land surveyor as we know it today is going to be around in 20 years. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. I know that can be kind of a controversial topic. And I don't want you guys to feel like you need to take notes. I originally gave this talk a couple years ago at UC Berkeley GIS Day, and there's an article version of this whole talk, several pages long, and I'll give you guys the link there at the end. You can download that article. And then hopefully this is getting taped, and I'll post this online after the conference so you guys can download it and watch it again if you want. So we want to know what the surveyor of the future looks like. Tell you a little bit about myself. This isn't me. I didn't have any good pictures of myself, so I put this is my field crew. They're doing a survey on Highway 99. And I didn't even know they made a tripod this tall. Isn't this crazy? And we were trying to get fewer setups on the side of the freeway, so we got us a tall tripod so the guys could see out farther with the reflectorless instrument. You know, you want a high as angle as possible on reflectorless shots. And so my party chief came up with this idea. I don't know if this is OSHA compliant or not, but my party chief, his favorite saying is adapt and overcome. That's what you have to do when you're in the field, adapt and overcome. Really great field crew. And isn't it true that as surveyors, we're only as good as our field crew? Isn't that true? So I've got a really good field crew, so I'll put the picture on there. Give them some credit at the beginning. Oop. So I think John did a good job covering my my bio there in the introduction, so we're not going to talk anymore about that. Anybody know what that picture is of?
Typewriter.
Yeah, that's a typewriter. That's an old typewriter. And I'm going to ask lots of questions. I think it's more enjoyable when you get the audience involved. So please answer my questions so I don't feel awkward up here. Yeah, that's an old typewriter. Now what is a picture of a typewriter doing in a slide show about land surveying? Well, let me tell you a little story about it. A mentor of mine, he wasn't a land surveyor, but he's a good friend of mine that I met when I moved to Stockton. And when he finished high school, he went to a vocational school to be a typewriter repairman. And he told me, he said, Landon, I was the best typewriter repairman this side of the Rockies. And he said, how valuable do you think that skill is now? He said, to this day, you give me a typewriter, something wrong with it, he said, I can fix it. He said, but nobody wants that skill anymore. And so I think there's a valuable lesson there for land surveyors, right? It doesn't matter how good we are at what we do, if we don't pay attention to the changes that are happening in the world, we're going to end up like a really good typewriter repairman. And so we don't want that to happen. So I thought that was an appropriate picture and a good story. He scared me with that story. So what we wanted to talk about this morning was some recent changes that impact land surveyors. And we're going to talk about three areas. We're going to talk about education, we're going to talk about collaboration, and then we're going to talk about how we execute our particular skill set or trade or craft, profession, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not going to spend as much time on education today just because we're pressed for time, but anybody have an idea of what's happened with the cost of higher education the last 10 years? Anybody have an idea? I know we got some students in the room. Yes?
I've got a 16-year-old, so I'm starting to think about that.
16-year-old? Yeah.
Seems like it's tripled.
Yeah, it's gone up. What was your name?
George.
George, thank you, George.
Yeah,
John?
in the last 10 years, it's gone from about $1,300 a semester to $3,000.
Yeah, it's really gone up a lot. Yeah, actually, I got some figures here I want to show you. So from 1982 to 2007, that's about 2 decades, the cost of higher education in the United States has gone up 439%, which is pretty amazing. Don't you wish your pay had gone up 439% since 1982? So that's pretty staggering. And if you think about it, now I went to school in Montana. There was only one community college within, I don't know how many hours of where I lived. And then the closest university, I think, was 2 or 3 hours. And that made it a real challenge for a lot of people in my community to go to college, just because of the distance involved. And think about the way our current education system works. So you show up for a lecture. The college professor gives the lecture, the same lecture he gave last year and probably the year before that, right? And then the next year, what's he going to do on that same day of school? He's going to give the same lecture, right? And let me ask you, how efficient is that system? How efficient is that? To pay that same man to stand up in front of that class and give the same lecture over and over?
I think it's fairly efficient.
He thinks it's fairly efficient. Okay, so George is going to be the thorn in my side this morning. He thinks it's fairly efficient. Here's my point. In a place like Montana, what do you have to do if you want to hear the lecture?
Drive.
Yeah, you got to drive there. Yeah.
You got to pick up and move and wash dishes and get yourself an apartment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So here's my point. This is what I think is going to happen with education. I think there are going to be organizations and individuals that figure out how to make education more efficient. And one of the ways they're going to do that is they're going to do that by moving the educational instruction online, right? And so instead of paying the professor to give the same lecture over and over, you're going to pay him to videotape it once. And then that course is going to be available online to whoever needs it, wherever they need it, whenever they need it. Okay? Now, it's not that I think there isn't a role for college, for instruction from a professional. I think there is, but I question whether or not lecture is the best use of his time, right? So videotape those lectures and then have that professor spend his time on other things. And I think what you're going to find as we move forward is that these brick and mortar institutions of higher education are going to struggle. And I think there's going to be some really sharp people that find a way to make education much more accessible and much more efficient. And what is that going to do to the cost?
Hopefully go back down.
Hopefully it'll go down. Now, why is this important to us as land surveyors? I'll get your question. Go ahead.
Well, isn't that what they're doing now with all the online courses? I mean,
There's
if
already
you look at it, there
Sure.
is a ton of.
There's a ton of stuff online, and I think we're moving that. I think we're already seeing a move in that direction. Yeah, and part of the point of my talk is to kind of identify these trends that are already starting to happen. So why is that important? Why do we care as land surveyors? Well, one of the challenges we have as land surveyors is, I think it's a challenge for us to educate our future professionals. I don't think anybody would deny that. And I was telling my wife on the way down here, we're driving down to Fresno, there's only a few academic programs in the United States where you can go and get a degree in land surveying. Now, if you happen to live in a state that doesn't have a program, what do you got to do? George told us. You got to move, right? Get a new apartment, get a new job, and go to school. There wasn't a place for me to get a 4-year degree in land surveying in the state of Montana. Now, we can expect that of people. And I'm not saying that you can't, I'm not trying to be a whiner here. I worked 2 jobs to put myself through school. But here's my point. I think there are going to be organizations and individuals that figure out how to get that young man or young woman the education they want, and they don't have to move. They don't have to quit their good job. They don't have to leave their family. And so, where do we want the programs that educate our land surveyors to be on that curve? And one of the reasons I think we need to think about that, especially in the private sector, is I think as education moves from a brick and mortar institution to more of an online learning environment, then the big question that comes up is, where do you get the hands-on training? You know, where do you get your lab time? Where do you actually put your hands on an instrument? And what I hope will happen as we see this move towards online education, and I think it's inevitable, it's going to happen, just a question of time. What I would like to see is I would like to see partnerships between the academic organizations and the private sector, so that the private sector has a role through internships or some other vehicle in providing that hands-on experience. And I think as a community of land surveyors, we need to look at that as a professional responsibility, and we need to be willing to take steps to partner with those academic institutions when that comes up. Okay, we'll talk for a little bit about collaboration. I'm going to make this quick because the last part of the talk is the most important. It used to be if you wanted to collaborate with a fellow professional, what did you have to do? What did you have to do if you wanted to collaborate or interact with a fellow? Let's just say 20 years ago, what did you have to do?
Face to face.
Yeah, you have to get in your car and drive, or what else could you do?
Send a lot of mail.
Send some mail, or you could pick up the telephone, right? And we don't have to do that now, do we? And so the way people interact and collaborate has really changed in the last few years. And so ask yourself this question. Just as an example, have the professional organizations that support the land surveying profession kept up with that change? Have they enabled you to collaborate with your peers online? And what about your company? Has your company done that? And it's interesting. You guys somebody probably caught that. How many hours do you think people spent last year watching YouTube? Anybody know? A lot of it was at work, probably. Probably you guys watching YouTube at work. Anybody want to guess? No guesses?
Billions.
2.9 billion hours people watching YouTube. That's amazing to me. Now we're not counting.
Oh, that's each month.
Oh, I'm sorry, each month. Yeah, 2.9 billion hours each month. That's not counting, Facebook or Twitter. So here's what's going to happen. See, we're raising a whole generation of people that are used to collaborating online. And if our professional organizations don't adapt to those changes, then we're going to struggle to keep people engaged in the important activities that those professional societies are involved in. And so I think that's another important thing we need to think about as educators. How do we collaborate? How do we get together? How do we share ideas? And so that's important as well.
Landon?
Yes?
What did you have in mind when you say that professional organizations should do something?
I'm thinking, like CLSA and ACSM and NSPS. Just as an example, one of the things we've done in our local chapter of CLSA, and I know some other chapters have done this, is we have a website now where you can get on, you can renew your membership online, we've got a schedule so you can track your continuing education hours if you attend the different meetings. We've got a mailing list now. So there's a lot of things that can be done to enable participation between professionals. And what I use as an example of what can be accomplished is, I use open source software as an example because I do a little bit of open source software development. And there's a group of people that maintain a program called OpenJump. I'm not going to talk about it at this conference, but I've talked about it in the past. It's an open source desktop GIS program. And we've been maintaining that program for, I want to say half a dozen years now, and I feel that we've done a pretty good job with it. And that's all done by volunteers all over the world, Europe, China, America, and none of those people have ever met face-to-face. Everything we do is done through online collaboration. Now, the reason I bring that example up is I want people to appreciate that you can accomplish real, tangible work through online collaboration. And so think about some of the challenges we face as a profession, whether it be monument preservation, or continuing education, or all sorts of different projects, and ask yourself how online collaboration could be applied to those problems. And let me give you an example. One of the things that we would like to do in my local chapter of the CLSA, we've talked about it, and I'm trying to get it off the ground, I just have been neglecting it, is we would like to take the BLM's data set for the public land system in our 2-3 county area, and we would like to start to improve that data. So initially locate the corner locations on aerial photography, enter data about what record maps show those corners, eventually do field surveys to put survey coordinates on those corners. And that first step of that process, see, all of that can be done online. And so what we hope to do is we're going to actually build a website where you can log in, enter data for a particular corner. Maybe it's a corner that you just worked in on your project, right? And all that data will be aggregated together. We'll push out a data set, like a shapefile or a DWG file with that information. So those are the types of things that we can start to do online now that we didn't used to do. And although we're starting to see a little bit of that, I don't think the potential has been tapped quite yet. Okay, this is the most important section I want to talk about. The execution of our craft and trade. Okay, so what are some trends or changes that you guys think have changed the way land surveyors execute their craft, let's just say in the last 20 years? Somebody give me some examples. GPS, yeah. GPS has really revolutionized what surveyors do. Any others you guys can think of?
PC.
I'm sorry.
PC.
Just
Computer.
the desktop computer, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, when I went to college, the very first class I took, surveying class, was a hand drafting class. And that was like Chinese water torture. I hated it. We had to ink a record of survey as our final in that class. I'll be honest, I don't know how those guys used to do it. I mean, I have so much respect for the guys that used to hand ink those plan sets. I mean, isn't it true that what we do today is just way more efficient? It's so much easier, you know? You want a copy of a sheet, you Control-C, Control-V, right? And in the old days, they had to like actually draw another sheet, right? I mean, it just blows my mind. Yeah, so the PC is another good one. What about laser scanning? What about LiDAR?
Not yet.
Yeah, for those that can afford it, yeah.
GIS.
Yeah, what about the bathymetric surveying technology that's come about? How many of you guys could access a 1-foot resolution aerial photography online for a project area you were interested in 10 years ago? Anybody? My company recently picked up a data set for most of the Central Valley. Let's just say Fresno to Sacramento. 1-foot resolution, we picked that up for a couple $1,000, a few $1,000. Color 1-foot resolution photography. Now before, if you wanted a 1-foot resolution color photography of your project site, what do you have to do? You had to put a plane in the air and fly it, and that was expensive. So you don't have to do that as much anymore, and I think that's going to continue. So there's all kinds of changes that have been happening. So I just identified 8. We mentioned GPS, fast static, RTK. We've got these are things that have come in my own short career. Reflectorless EDM, robotic total station, terrestrial laser scanning, desktop GIS, LiDAR, the sonar, just some of the different technologies that have come about. So let me ask you guys, we're going to get into the most important part of the talk now. I've got about 7 minutes left. What is the implication or consequences of this, of all the changes that we talked about? Have you thought about it? Fast forward that now 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, what's the implications? Pretty powerful.
You don't need as many surveyors.
Okay, that's an important one. There was another comment.
Sorry, I'm switching. You can accomplish the stuff in a faster period of time.
Yeah, what was your name?
Travis.
Travis, thank you. Yeah, so data collection has gotten more efficient, which means it's also gotten what?
Cheaper.
Cheaper, which means as a land surveyor, what has that done to your profit margin?
Made it better.
Yeah, it squeezed your profit margin. So back in, you go back 150 years ago, 100 years ago, when they were surveying California public lands, how many guys on a crew?
3 to 5.
I don't know, they had like the head rodman, the rear rodman, the instrument man, the note taker, the cook, the donkey hauler, I mean, it was just crazy, right? How many guys you got now?
1,
2.
2 at the most. A lot of crews, a lot of guys run 1. And we run 2 at my company just for safety reasons, but a lot of guys run a single man crew. Yeah, so we don't need as many surveyors. And so that really concerns me as a surveyor, because I kind of feel like the typewriter repairman, right? And there's a term that we throw around at my office, we kind of tease each other. It's called the global point cloud, right? And here's the basic concept. How long is it going to be until a company like Microsoft or Google or one of the big boys creates a point cloud that spans the entire United States? Highly accurate point cloud, right? Yeah, and so let's just say, go big with me. Imagine. So imagine you've got this point cloud that covers the continental United States, or maybe just the urban areas in the United States. Now, if you're an engineer or an architect or a land planner, and you're gonna start to design your project, are you gonna call me for a topo?
No.
You're gonna get online, you're gonna download the tile for the area that you need, and you're gonna have all the data you want right there. Now, you may think, wow, Landon, he's kind of paranoid, and that's, I'm gonna be retired before that happens. But let me tell you a real life example of that from my own office. We do a lot of work in the Delta, Sacramento Sandwich and Delta. And not too long ago, DWR flew a LiDAR set of the whole Delta. And so now for a lot of at least our initial planning on our levee improvement projects, we used to go out and do a profile and cut 500 foot or 200 foot or 1,000 foot cross sections. You know what we do now? You know what the engineers in my office do now?
Download that data or log on.
They
We
just
just
pull
did that.
Sure.
Same thing.
Yeah.
6 months ago, one of our engineers.
Yeah, thanks, George. They just pull up the LiDAR data. Hey, you want 200 foot? They cut 200 foot. You want 500 foot? They cut 500 foot. You want brake lines? They cut brake lines. And you know how good that LiDAR data is?
Surprisingly good.
It's pretty good. You know what? I was irritated at how good it was. We were hoping it would be crappy, but it's not. That data's pretty good data. Yeah. What are the implications of that for a firm like mine? Now, that has real positive benefits for society, doesn't it? Because it's going to make everything cheaper. It's going to make it cheaper to maintain the levees. That's good for us as taxpayers. It's good for the farmers. Bad for the surveyors, though. So what I'm trying to help you appreciate is, if we're not careful, ultimately we become the fat, expensive middleman in this process. And what happens to fat, expensive middlemen eventually? They get cut out. Yeah, they get cut out. Okay, so to sum that whole discussion up, if you only take one thing away from this talk, I hope this is what it is. Sorry. Geospatial data. I'm talking about points, lines, DTMs, photography, remotely sensed data. Geospatial data. If it's not already, will soon be a what? A commodity. Yeah, commodity. And so, do we as professionals want to be in the business of selling a commodity?
No.
Why not?
Because you get bid, you end up getting lowballed.
Yeah. You know what? You don't make money selling commodities. You don't. Because if all we're talking about is a commodity, the guy that can do it the fastest and the cheapest is going to get the work. These are coffee beans, by the way. Yeah. So now, some people aren't like my wife, she has a very particular coffee taste, right? But a lot of people, they don't care. Is it coffee? Does it come in a can? That's all they worry about. So, just to give you one quick example and there's more examples in the article, of how geospatial data is becoming a commodity. This is from Imaging Notes magazine. They've got a new satellite system. It's called Rapid Eye. They've got 5 satellites that work together in a constellation, and they produce aerial photography. It's not real high resolution, but it's I think it's 1 meter or close. They acquire 1.5 million square miles of satellite photography each day. Does that not blow your mind? That is an area equal to the landmass of the United States east of, and I made a mistake, it's Missouri River. Every day they acquire that. They have something like 9 times the Earth's surface of imaging data already stored.
Constantly updated?
Yeah, they go round and round and round. Yeah, it's called Rapid Eye. The whole concept behind the company, Rapid Eye, I'm going to be careful because I'm going to misspeak here, but is that they can offer you recent satellite photography of an area, the last couple days at any point on the Earth surface. That's geospatial data as a commodity, my friends. So, what are the implications of this? Please, if you're interested in the topic today, get online and read the article. But the implication is, as land surveyors, we have to learn not to be data producers. Because data producers are going to get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. So if we're not data producers then, what is our role? What's our role? Any suggestions? What is our role as land surveyors if we don't produce the data?
Should be service providers.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. What was your name?
Travis.
Travis, thank you very much. Yeah, so here's what I would encourage you to do as land surveyors. Think about what do you do with the data that's already been produced? How do you help your clients analyze that data to solve problems, to save real money? How is that data presented cartographically? How is it presented online? You need to become a manager of geospatial data, not a producer of geospatial data. And here's why that is so important. As the price of geospatial data comes down, it's going to become more abundant, and your clients are going to have the ability to do projects that they couldn't do 10 or 20 years ago because it was too expensive. And I want you guys, I want land surveyors to be the ones that are managing those projects. Learn how to take that spatial data and produce real value from it. Am I stepping on the next speaker? Is the next speaker here?
He's standing outside.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm gonna stop. RedefineHorizons.com/talks. If you get on there, you can find a link to the slides. I'll put the slides on there. The article's there already. And if I have time, I'm going to do this. Oh, we've got the video. I'll put the video up there too. So thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry I didn't have more time to talk.
We're gonna post these videos so we can see it later tonight.
Yeah, I'll put the video. If you go to RedefineHorizons.com talks, there'll be a link to this talk, and I'll have the video. Give me a week or two to get it up there. John, you don't have to go through that whole bio again, because we're pressed for time. So
Okay.
you can do the
Sorry, did I
introduction,
leave you
but
enough time?
that's all right. I ran over, so I don't feel bad. We put both of them on there. You only have the two? Yeah.
Okay. Our next speaker is licensed in both California and Nevada. He is going to be giving a presentation on using GIS to solve 3 problems faced by the Central Valley communities. Mr. Landon Blake.
Thank you. That was an interesting talk by Paul. I don't have any of those scary formulas. That made me nervous just looking at that stuff. So my talk will be easy on the brain. We're supposed to break at 10. What I'd like to do with your graciousness is run to 5 after 10. And then I can take questions after that if you want to get up and go to the exhibit hall. It won't hurt my feelings at all. So, okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about how GIS can be used to solve real problems. And we're going to focus on some problems faced by communities in the Central Valley. And the main objective of this talk is to help you appreciate that there's real money involved here. And so, as surveyors, I think there's a potential for us to be a part of very important solutions to problems that our communities face, and I think there's opportunities to make money from that. Now, I'll tell you right here at the start that I don't have all the answers. So I don't have a 10-step plan for how you can leave this room today and make money with GIS. But I think that the opportunities are out there, and I think as a profession we need to think about it. So I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. And I know a lot of surveyors are looking for opportunities to make money from new kinds of work. And I wish that this idea I had was more developed, so I could offer that to you. But at least I can get you started thinking about it. Things that my company's thinking about. Okay, we don't need to go over that. Well, that was when I had hair then. That's why I put that picture on there. One of the few pictures where I actually have some hair. This was actually on the east shore of Lake Tahoe. We were doing some work there for a sewer pipeline and trying to hike up the mountains there on the east shore. And we had to set the photo panels, but they got to be flat, right? So we had to like actually dig pads out. It was crazy. And you get all the way up to the top, and then the battery in the rover goes dead. You got to go back down to the truck. It was, anyways, a fun job. Very pretty place. Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 problems. We're going to talk about managing flood hazards. We're going to talk about preservation of agricultural land, and we're going to talk about urban sprawl. And I also want to say here at the start that I'm not going to take any political or policy positions today. That's not the purpose of the speech. But these are real problems, and I think they're important decisions that our communities have to make. And so how can GIS help us to make better decisions in those 3 areas? That's what I'm going to focus on. So don't attack me for any political statements. You won't see any Romney or Obama posters in here for the election or anything like that. Okay, so let's talk about flood control. Why is flood control such a problem in the valley? Does anybody have thoughts on that? Why? It's really one of the few places. There are other places in the world where flooding is a problem, but not like the Central Valley. We're maybe one of the few handful of places where flooding is such a huge problem. Does anybody know why? The geographic reasons why it's a problem.
It's flat and it's going down.
Thank you, Marty. Yes, it's flat and it's going down, so that's important. Yeah, it's a bowl shape. What else? There's some other geographic reasons, George.
It's a natural floodplain that was changed by man.
Sure, natural floodplain, yeah. So where does most of the water come that gets us in trouble? Where does it come from? I mean, I know it comes from the rain, but where geographically does it come from?
Sierra Nevada.
It comes from the Sierra Nevada. Now, why do they not have a problem in Reno or Carson City? They're on the dry side, we're on the wet side. Yeah, so there's some really kind of unique geographical features that come together to present a real problem for the Central Valley. There's an interesting study, and I'll link to it on the webpage for this talk, an interesting study that the USGS did called the arc storm scenario. If you haven't read that, I really encourage you to do that. And I believe the figure they had in the study was that the arc storm is a flood that would occur every 500 to 1,000 years. And they had, I think in the early 1800s, they had that type of storm. And it would basically flood a strip in the valley 300 miles long by 20 miles wide. This is pretty huge. So flooding is a real problem for our communities. How many of you as surveyors in your land development projects or your practice are dealing with clients and communities that are having problems with flood issues? Anybody? Okay, there's probably a half a dozen. That's a major deal at my office. I'd say at least once a week I get a call from a landowner or a client, and they've got, you know, a mortgage broker or local public officials telling them they need an elevation certificate, and they need an elevation certificate, but there's no base flood elevation established, and there's just all kinds of problems. I got a land development project actually started back up. I couldn't believe it. Somebody's going to subdivide some land. And the thing might get tabled just because of the cost of the flood study to establish base flood elevations. So this is a huge issue for the valley, and it's only going to get more important. And if you're at all involved in the land development side of things, I think you're going to see this more. These flood issues become an issue. It's a particular issue to my company, KSM, because we do a lot of work with the reclamation districts in the Delta. Okay, I've got some figures here. I think it was 2004, Jones Tract flooded. Did anybody have an idea of the rough cost of that flood? What it cost to pump it out and what it cost in lost crops? Just a round figure.
40 million?
40 million, that was an excellent guess. Yeah, cost to pump out that island was 50 million. Lost value of agricultural crops was 30 million. So that was an $80 million flood event. Now, do you think they spent $80 million on that levee system?
No.
Probably in the lifetime of that levee system they haven't spent $80 million. I don't know if did they spend 10% of that? I don't know. Ooh. Boy, this thing is just, you need to throw this thing away. Okay, so here's the point of this slide. We're talking about real dollars here, aren't we? One flood was $80 million. Let me give you another example of the real money that we're talking about. This is it's on the other end of the spectrum, but I think it illustrates an important point. I got a call from a landowner a couple months ago, and he lived up against the levee. And he was in next to a Zone X flood zone. And Zone X means that the zone is in the channel, in the river channel. So the physical levee is the boundary of the zone. But FEMA went in and mapped at some scale, and I can't remember the scale of mapping, right? And so what some company did, I don't know who it was, is they took FEMA's maps and they digitized the flood boundary, right? And so then the folks at the local city take this digitized layer of the flood boundary and they overlay it on a 1-foot resolution color ortho photo. And guess where the flood boundary goes? Does it go down the center of the levee? No, it goes right through the guy's house. And so what did they tell him? He was trying to do he like had a little fire or something, was trying to repair the damage. What did they tell this guy? The city. Hey, man, you're in a flood zone. You got to get an elevation certificate, and we might not let you build. So the guy calls me in a panic, right? So I look at the FEMA map. I'm like, you're not in a flood zone. The zone X, your house is on the other side of the levee. We had to make a phone call eventually to FEMA to get that straightened out. Now, had that man called a surveyor that didn't understand flood control issues, what would the surveyor told him when he said, I need an elevation certificate?
I'd be happy to give you one.
Sure, $2,500, we'll roll that baby out, right? So here's my point. We got both ends of the spectrum here, right? We got 80 million on one end, we got maybe, 500, 1,500, I don't know what you guys do elevation certificates for at the other end. But my point is, this issue costs people money. Now, here's the point. Where are we better off spending the money? Are we better off spending the money on an elevation certificate that somebody doesn't need because the zone was improperly mapped or digitized, right? Or is it better to spend that money to have more accurate flood data mapping? See? Is it better to spend that money so that the people that use that data understand things like map scales? Right?
Yeah, that's the problem, is the people who are making these decisions at the counties and cities don't know anything about surveying, flood mapping, or anything.
That's the problem when data goes digital. See, but whose fault is that? Whose fault is it that the people at the city don't understand? Whose fault?
The city.
No, it's not the city's fault. Whose fault is it?
Ours.
Our fault. It's our fault. Who was that?
Right here.
What's your name?
Brian,
Brian, you get a gold star. It's our fault. Why is it our fault?
we need to teach them.
We know, see, we are the experts, we are the professionals, right? Now, I didn't do this, I should have done it. What should I have done after the phone call with the landowner? Who's the next person I needed to talk to? I should have gone down and found who is that counter person and put the map on the counter and explained to him, look, I don't care what you see on your screen, this is the reality, see? So yeah, it's our fault that people aren't educated, so we got to think about it. That's why we do talks like this, right? Okay, so flood control is a huge problem. So how can GIS help mitigate the cost of flood control? I just want some suggestions there. I have a list, but some ideas? Anybody how GIS can reduce the cost of flood damages in the valley? Or improve the management of flooding? Any suggestions? Let me share a few with you. So GIS can help us improve our understanding of the risk, right? That gets back to the example that we just talked about, right? Where is the risk really at? Now, was that guy really in a floodplain? Not if the levee's okay. So see, there was a misunderstanding about risk there, right? And that was going to cost somebody some money. It can prioritize and guide the improvements of flood infrastructure, right? We're going to spend a lot of money on levees in the next few years, right? Where do we spend that money? And why do we spend it? Where we're going to spend it? And when do we spend it? And how much do we spend? Do we need 200 foot, or do we need 200-year flood protection, or 100-year? Do we need 500-year? What do those different floodplains look like? Now listen, if you're a landowner in, let's just say Stockton, east side of Stockton, and somebody comes to you and says, we want to assess you, Mr. Blake, $50 a year for the next 50 years to pay for improved flood protection. What is Mr. Blake probably going to tell you?
No, thank you.
No, I pay enough taxes, right? But now, if you show Mr. Blake a map, and the 200-year floodplain goes through his house, and you say, Mr. Blake, we'd like to assess you $50 a year for the next 50 years, pay for flood improvements. Now what might Mr. Blake say? Maybe. See, he might say yes. See? So understanding the risk, communicating the risk to the public, prioritizing where the money gets spent, right? How do we decide where money gets spent in California on flood control improvements? Does anybody know?
politicians.
We
Yeah.
don't.
Well,
Yeah, well, that's the point. Yeah, Travis, say that again?
We don't.
Yeah, how transparent is the process? And furthermore, do the policymakers, the people that decide where to spend the money, do they have GIS as a tool to make those decisions? And if they don't, whose fault is it?
well, isn't it the Army Corps of Engineers?
Well, what'd you say before? I'm sorry, what was your name?
Brian,
Brian, whose fault is it, Brian, that they don't have the tools they need?
that they do.
Well, some of them, yeah, some of them do. But see, here's my point. What I'm trying to encourage you to do as professionals and as businessmen and women is to look for opportunities to help your community make better decisions. Because at the end of the day, what does it mean? It means real money. And if we can save our communities real money, and not just communities, but local businesses, landowners, citizens, if we can save them real money through better decisions, do we not deserve a little tiny piece of the action? You know, what's a little tiny piece of $80 million? See? Okay, next one, agriculture. Oh, I just gave away the answer to the next question. What is the value of agriculture what was the value of agriculture in 2010 to San Joaquin County? That's my county. You guys see how much it was?
$2 billion.
$2 billion. We're talking some serious money, yeah. Now, what kind of pressures are there on agriculture right now? If you're a farmer, maybe you guys know some farmers or have farmers in the family. What kind of problems do they have? What was that?
No rain.
Marty, yeah. Okay, so water's a huge problem. We actually have some clients in the San Joaquin County area that are doing the math right now because it's cheaper to fallow the land and sell the water than it is to grow the crops. That's pretty amazing. Now, is that going to get worse or better?
A lot.
Probably going to get worse. Probably is going to get worse. Yeah. Now, here's the problem. For a place like San Joaquin County, I imagine the same thing is true for those of you that are from Fresno. How important is agriculture to a place like San Joaquin County? It's huge. You think we have another industry that's worth $2 billion in San Joaquin County? It ain't tourism. How many people go to Stockton to see the sights? Drugs, yeah. I'm giving my town a bad rap. Okay, so there's all kinds of pressures. So water is a pressure. What's another pressure on agriculture? What's another pressure besides water? There's others.
EPA,
Okay, yeah. Urban sprawl. Yeah, thank you. What was your name?
Brian?
Brian, and then what'd you say?
EPA.
EPA. What was your name again?
Brian.
Brian, two Brians. That's what's messing me up. Yeah, so government regulation. Okay, so how can GIS help us preserve or increase this number here? What are some ways GIS can do that? I'm trying to get you guys to push the envelope a little bit. So what can it do?
Identify.
Land planning, okay. Planning, how? Planning how? Planning, what do you mean by planning? Give me a little more detail, John.
You can download the information of where better farmland is, where crops are growing.
Okay, yeah. Where better farmland is? Yeah, so let me give you a couple examples. I'm doing some volunteer work with a nonprofit that preserves agricultural farmland from conservation easements. And so GIS is a great tool to identify, number one, which lands are most at risk of development, agricultural lands, and number two, which lands are the best agricultural lands in the county, right? Right. Now, if you get a GIS to tell you which lands are the best and which lands are the most at risk, and you get an overlap there, well, then those are your candidates for conservation, right? And so that's important. Here's the thing. We're going to talk a little bit more about this well, maybe not, when we get to urban sprawl. You go in and you pave over 40 acres of farmland, quarter section, okay? And you develop that, either commercially or residentially. And there's a huge payoff there initially, isn't there? Right? There's a huge payoff. You know, the developer makes money, the local agencies make money, the property tax values are higher. Okay, but think about now, after that initial kick is over, year after year after year, and I think 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, what is the economic contribution of a subdivision tract to the local economy?
Probably got some more.
Yeah, it's not only is it zero, but it's negative. Why is it negative?
That's sewer repairs.
You got infrastructure to maintain. So I want you to think about this now. For every acre of land we take out of agricultural production in the valley and put in commercial or residential, what are we doing to this number?
Decreasing.
It gets small. Okay, now we're going to go ahead. We're going to just jump to Oh, one other thing before we jump to the next slide, because that'll key us into urban sprawl. Here's another example of a project, a GIS project that can help preserve agriculture. We've got a local irrigation district that is just seriously had their water supply cut, the ability to pump water cut. And so here's the problem these guys have. They've got all these landowners in this irrigation district, and guess what? There's not enough water to get to the guys at the end of the pipe. And they all paid, right? They all paid, you know, their assessment to get the water. So they've got to figure out what? What are these guys going to have to figure out?
Where they're going to get more water.
Okay, either how they're going to get more water or what?
Distribute the water they have.
Okay, how to share the water they have or reduce the use of the water they've already got. Now, how can GIS help with that problem? What do you think?
Develop water reuse.
Okay, water reuse could be part of it. Yeah, here's one way GIS could help in that situation. You could analyze different cropping plans, right? Joe plants sunflowers, Bob plants corn, you know, Landon plants tomatoes. What's our water usage? All right, we're too high, we're too low, let's drop it. Okay, well, depending on how much rain we get, right? So then you can start to look at how you're going to help this irrigation district, these farmers, manage their crops to maximize their profit with the water that's available, right? Again, we're talking about real money there, right?
Tell them how much acres owned by who and how far
Sure.
from the pipe.
Yeah, exactly, right? Good stuff. Okay, so we talked a little bit about urban sprawl. Anybody know in Sacramento County how many square miles of land converted from agricultural to urban use in the last decade? Anybody want to guess number of square miles?
I don't even want to think about it.
You haven't traveled, don't even want to think about it. 90 square miles. Now, how much is that? Well, we basically added to something the size of the city of Sacramento the last 10 years. Yeah, that's a huge number. Now, think about the cost, the economic cost now to our community of urban sprawl. What are some of those? Like I said, I'm not here to make policy decisions, but let's talk about the real economic cost of urban sprawl. We already talked about what happens when you take agricultural land out of production, right? But what are some other costs from urban sprawl? Economic costs.
Police, fire,
Schools.
Yeah, schools. Yeah, okay, yeah. You know, think about the extra, time we spend in gasoline,
Right.
getting those people into work and back out again. So, I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind that it's smarter to build up than it is to build out, right? We know that. Okay. So there's all kinds of interesting questions that come up that can be answered with GIS, right? Where in urban areas is it best to develop? You know, if you're a developer and you're trying to identify parcels that are, what policies, land use policies, can we implement to encourage that development in the right areas, right? If we're going to allow people to pay over farmland for additional development, how much farmland is reasonable? What are the implications of those changes? Do we want to pass the costs of those impacts on to the developer and the people that end up buying the houses? You know, those are all questions that can be answered with GIS. So GIS is a tool that can influence land use policy in a positive way. And I'm not talking about using GIS as a propaganda tool. I'm talking about using GIS as a tool to help people make better decisions. Communities, land planners, individual companies. And we have the expertise to do that. And so I encourage you to think about those opportunities and to think about how your company can take advantage of them. Now here's the problem. In most of these examples we talked about, if you're going to use GIS to reduce costs or to save money or to make money, that requires that you spend up front to save down the road, right? And of course human nature is to do what? Skimp now and spend later. That's why we let a levee on an island fail and it cost us $80 million to fix it, right? And we could have spent a fraction of the $80 million just to maintain the levee. Okay? So the uphill battle we have as land surveyors and GIS professionals is, how do we convince people to spend the money up front so that they can save money in the long run? Now that's hard. That's a hard case to make, but it is a smarter way to do business, and so that's what we need to try and do. All right, this talk will be up. I haven't done an article for this talk yet, but I will try and do that, and we'll get the video online. If you go to redefinehorizons.com/talks, And then if you Google redefinerises.blog.com, I will post on my blog when the video and the articles are available. Okay? I took my 5 minutes. You guys are welcome to leave for break. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to entertain questions. Put this clicker down before I hurt somebody.